Hello everybody, welcome back to the second grade worksheet. We'll be going over lesson 38. And to start off, we'll go with missing numbers. Now missing numbers is simply knowing when to use the correct operation in order to find the missing number. So in number 1, we see that 56 plus an unknown number equals 398. Now how do we find the missing number? Well, we do the opposite operation, in which is subtraction. So, if 56 plus a number equals 398, then 398 minus 56 will result in that missing number as well, because it is the opposite operation. So, simply, this will just be simple subtraction in the end. So, 8 minus 6 equals 2. Remember, we go one placement at a time. 9 minus 5 equals 4, and just bring the 3 down, which gets you 342. So, the missing number we find is that it is 342. Sorry if that's a little messy. It's also sometimes really good to check your answers to make sure you don't have the wrong answer. And we see that 56 plus 342, this should equal to 398. So 2 plus 6 equals 8, 4 plus 5 equals 9, and 3 bring it down, which gets you 398. We get the same answer of 398, showing that 342 is indeed the answer for number 1. Okay, we will move on to skip counting. Skip counting is essentially just finding the pattern in the string of numbers it gives you. So let's take a look at number 1. This is a very simple one to start off with, in which it's very obvious to anyone, or as presumably, it's very simple to see that it is actually adding by 5. So plus 5, and of course the next one would be also plus 5, getting you 20, another plus 5, getting you 25, and 30. And we know that this is constantly going up by 5 because we see in these two numbers that 5 plus 5 equals 10, and 10 plus 5 equals 15. So, while there's no 100% possibility that that is the pattern, that is what most likely the pattern will be, due to the first three numbers showing that plus 5 is the ongoing pattern. Now, if we were to try another one, not all numbers start the same. So let's take an example at number 5, 8. Now, you might be thinking, well, if it's 8 and continuing, maybe it's 8 plus 8 plus 8. That is not the case sometimes. While in number 1, we see that it's a plus 5, therefore it's going from 0 to plus 5. In number 5, the case is that it starts at 8 and continues at 18, 28, giving us the pattern that it is adding by 10. When it is adding by 10, it's not the jump from 0 to 8 that makes sense, but rather it starts at 8, not 0. So always keep in mind that the pattern doesn't always start at 0, and sometimes it can start at 5. It can start at the base number in which it starts at, allowing us to do number 5, in which it is adding 10 at a time. So this would be 38, 48, and 58. Alright, continue moving along to subtraction. Now we've gone over subtraction in number 1, where we had to use subtraction in order to find the missing number. This is not any different, and this is just subtraction. However, some differences in subtraction you'll see are that the process in moving a number for tens place to the ones place, or hundreds place to the tens place. So what do I mean by that? So in number 2, we see that 352 is subtracted by 98. Now, normally when we go back to number 1, we see that 8 minus 6 subtracts perfectly into 2, because 8 is obviously a greater number. But what happens if the top number is a lesser number than 8? You can't simply subtract 8 from 2, because that would get you less than 0, which is a possible number, but we'll get into that later on. So what you'll have to do is make this 2 into a greater number. So how do you do that? You make 2 into a greater number by moving a tens place over to the ones place. Now it is still a 10. There's nothing that is changed about the value of that 10. It is still a 10 nonetheless, which means this gets you 12 minus 8, not 2 minus 8. Now with this 12 minus 8, you're able to subtract easily and get yourself 4 as your answer. Again, when we look at number 10, we see once more that the top number is less than the bottom number. But you cannot subtract 9 minus 4 because 4 is less than 9, getting you a number that would be less than 0. So again, what do? We take out a hundreds place and move it into the tens place, getting us an answer that is subtractable. So 14 minus 9, that equals 5. We bring the 2 down because 2 is greater than 0, presumably, if the 0 was there, which gets us our answer of 254. Alright, perfect. So this is usually, a lot of problems will have this in which the number such as 6, there's also 4, and you see that in the ones place, when you subtract them in a vertical form, as you see right here, usually the number will be less than the bottom. So you'll have to carry over the tens place over to the ones place, or the hundreds place over to the tens place, in order to be able to solve your answer. Finally, let's move on to word problems. We'll begin with number 1. Emma has 35 cents. Using the least amount of coins possible, write how many of each coin she has. So this is asking us to figure out how many coins she has. Now, we went over coins before in which we have the penny, which equals 1 cent. Oops. The nickel, that equals 5 cents. And the dime, that equals 10 cents. And the quarter, that equals 25 cents. So we've gone over each of these coin values, and we want to figure out how many of each coin she has. Now, if you're not reading the problem correctly, you might be thinking that there's almost an infinite number of combinations that she can do. There can be 35 pennies, or there can be 7 fives. However, when we look at the problem, it's asking us to use the least amount of coins possible. So we don't want 35 pennies because that would be the most amount of coins. Instead, we want the least amount of coins that will add up to 35 cents. When we look at the values that we have that I've written out in front of there, you can obviously see the two coins that will lead up to 35, and that being 10 and 25. Because 35, you can split into several ways. So again, I've said you can turn it into 7 fives, you can turn it into 35 ones. However, 25 plus 10, it makes the most logical sense because there's no other way in which you can combine 35 with the least amount of coins possible. You can also do 3 tens and 1 5, or you can even do the opposite way, where you can do 5 fives and 1 10. But again, it's asking for the least amount of coins possible, and it says to write how many of each coin she has. And we know that because there's 125 and 110, we would write 1 quarter, well, I'll just write Q, and 1 dime. So she will need 1 quarter and 1 dime if she wants to spend 35 cents using the least amount of coins possible. Alright, thank you guys so much for listening, and have a great rest of the day.